Hello, my name is Robin Mullin, and I'm the president of the Inside Edge Foundation for Education. And it's a pure delight to announce that we are sponsoring a beautiful new series by Diana Wentworth, who will be sharing her amazing tips and practices and inspirations around creating more magic in your life. This is part 5 of the 6-part series on Expect Magic. And the theme today is sovereignty, a pure path to essence. Enjoy. So I'd like to introduce you to Diana Wentworth. She's been a best-selling author, award-winning author, actually, of 10 books, including her beautiful memoir, Send Me Someone. And she is now putting some of her stories and tips and inspirational ideas into her 11th book. She is an amazing, beautiful woman with a big, big heart who's continually, even after the age of 80 now, creating new and wonderful things in her life and for all of us. And with great joy and excitement, I'm able to introduce you to her now.
Sovereignty is the most amazing subject, and not one that we spend very much time thinking about usually. But it's so powerful for me right now in my life. It hasn't been my strong suit, I admit that. But now I live in continual silent retreat without my marital companions. And there are just subjects like this that really require deeper exploration. So in solitude, I'm being led into much more introspection, and especially on the subjects of sovereignty and dignity. And I really noticed that these things really take place in silence. We don't go about announcing our sovereignty or our dignity. I'm remembering my brother, who was a wonderful example of sovereignty in my life. I'm so grateful for him. And I remember one time my father, who was manic depressive and very, very loud and terrorizing, actually, demanding respect at the dinner table. And my brother said to him, respect isn't something that you can demand, you have to earn it. And I remember that just went through my heart. And so here we really are talking about something that is silent and lives inside of us. And it's really about honoring one's own values. And it's just such a perfect subject. I'm really valuing my legacy as I'm looking. At this age, one never knows whether something health-wise or otherwise might come along and interrupt our life suddenly. It's happened to a friend of Robin's and mine recently, where she's just suddenly disabled. So it's really, I think, timely for us and wise of us to look at this subject. So especially women, because women are trained, I think, to care for others, to put their own needs aside, to be unselfish, and to be a pleaser. And that it's almost like there's a lid on us as far as what we feel we are permitted to express. And this permission is something that we can only give ourselves. Nobody's really going to give us that permission. And it's up to us to know what our gift in the world is and how we want to express it. So I've given this a lot of thought lately, just thinking about you two. I mean, you guys, I had 2 husbands. They were both knights in shining armor. They rode in on their white steeds and they rescued me. And I really am real tired of that damsel in distress kind of role that I've played in my marriages. And I think that both of my husbands would really have benefited if I had spent more time on my own feelings of sovereignty and so on. So, excuse me, I just lost my scroll here. Okay. So we can look around and we can see examples of people who have not owned clarity around their own gifts. I think Elvis is a perfect example of this. I don't know if you saw the new movie Elvis, but oh my gosh, what an amazing film that was. And this man had so much music to share, and he loved sharing it. It was everything that he wanted to do in his life. And yet he didn't see that he was entrapped by, and he allowed himself to be entrapped by somebody who was not a good steward of his talent. He always wanted to travel overseas and see the world. And this man misled him and never allowed him to travel and sing and be the entertainer he wanted to be all over the world. And so it's really invisible to us. I mean, it was invisible to Elvis that this man was conning him and not leading him right. And it's very, very important, especially right now with the world and the condition it's in, to really see that women especially are being drawn and called into their own sovereignty. Sri Aurobindo said, if there's to be a future, it will wear a crown of feminine design. So this is something that we're all called to do. I look at Robin as someone who models this beautifully in her role as a mother and a grandmother. I love the way she raised her sons to have vision quests and to have their own sovereignty. And they're both hugely successful in their own ways. And that sovereignty includes being able to follow their own path. We can't cling to people and expect them to live out their life in a certain way. But both of these boys are so strong. And now she gets to be a grandmother, and she spends lots and lots of time just encouraging these beautiful babies to have a good time and love themselves and play. And she's really there for her. And I'm really learning in my own way to reach out and present myself in new ways to the world that I feel are my absolute pure path. And recently I had a wonderful old friend, a man who was very big in the entertainment industry, reach out to me and say, Diana, you're not valuing your own worth in the world. And he's just helping me out with all sorts of career decisions that I never could have made on my own. And there's just such goodness that comes from that. And I attribute it to the fact that this is something that's up for me right now, that I attracted him because I deserve it for what I want to do and make sure that my legacy exists of. So our inside edge really is our inner work, and it's where we're challenged and where we need to grow. And I no longer just give myself away. I'm very careful about that now.
Yeah.
So what I want to talk about here, there's a kind of a metaphor that I absolutely love. And it came to me in a gradual way. I went to a Monday evening meditation and my friend Candace was hosting it. She's very gifted at leading guided meditations. And she wanted to lead us into our very own essence. And so there was a group of us sitting around her living room. And my essence that I arrived at, I remember having this vision of being at the very top of a very, very tall mountain, maybe up in the New Mexico area, and being in a kind of a cave. I was sitting in the doorway of this cave looking out on the world. And I heard the words, I am a beacon. And I thought, I am a beacon. And there was something about that just resonated so deeply with me. You know that I've told often that the first thing that I do in the morning is ask, how may I most effectively light the world today? And I think of Jan Phillips, who I listened to her Think of Yourself on YouTube so many days. And she says, remember, you came here to light the world. And I really believe that that's our job, that when we spark joy in somebody, when we acknowledge somebody, when we reach up and climb into somebody's arms, that we are lighting the world, and that then generates more light, and that spreads out into the world in a much more powerful way. So in my own career, Paul and I had this fabulous career in cooking, entertaining, and it was just dying because the world was changing and the super chefs were coming in, and it wasn't about gathering people around the table. I always loved how people in my kitchen would just light up with the idea of a new recipe that they could go home and make for their family, or just in meeting the person next to them. I felt that when people left my kitchen at the end of my classes, that they were much more open and excited and receptive and all of that. And so I did begin to see or to feel that I had been this beacon. I had attracted these people into my kitchen, and that they were more lit up, and they were going out and they were being beacons to other people. And so when our career was falling apart, I had to do the quintessential questions. What now? What in the world are we going to do that would continue to light up the world in a way that wasn't going to be possible any longer in that old framework? And so I remember going at that meeting where I had that vision of being a beacon. I met a man named Tom Sewell, a photographer, fabulous soul brother, it would turn out, who led us to a meeting that was in a church at 6 a.m. And there were hundreds of people there, all lit up about going for their goals and not, doing whatever it takes and everything. And that was exciting. And that led us into the Soviet Union, where we were part of a documentary. And wow, I just was so inspired by the people still sharing information, but it was around the table, but it didn't have anything to do with the food. I promise you, the food in the Soviet Union was mostly cucumbers, as I remember. But there was still this kind of excitement about sharing resources and being lit up. And that led to this kind of this idea suddenly that we would have the Inside Edge. And the Inside Edge would be a breakfast where we would have an amazing speaker, and people would show up at 6:30 in the morning and listen to this speaker. We would have table processes where people shared resources and got to know each other. And then the speaker would talk, and we'd have table conversations. And in doing that, people got to know each other. And then we would always end with some kind of entertainment, some music, or we had a fabulous mime, or we had Swami Beyondananda with his rainbow wig and turban and make us laugh. And by the time the meeting was over, people were so lit up that they were just sharing all sorts of light and joy and resources with each other, that it was just so juicy. I mean, those meetings were so juicy. So I really see that the idea of being a beacon has been something that reminds me all the time that I'm here to light up the world, whatever that takes. Maybe it's just going out and talking to somebody in a market, or a compliment. I walked into Starbucks yesterday, and I was feeling a little heavy about something going on in my family. And a man says, "Oh my God, I love your hair." And I noticed that I just kind of came to, and then somebody else said, "So do I." And then we were all talking with each other. And it's like this contagious thing, this energy of excitement and love and beauty and encouragement is what lights up the world. And that's what we're all here for today. So I want you to know that this is the key. This is something that lives inside of us. Our sovereignty, our purity, our staying on a path of real self-inquiry about what is our purest path is something that begins to generate light inside of us and is contagious. I think the fact that it's contagious is amazing. And I think that we begin to trust that this is inside of us. It's accessible. It's accessible through our quintessential questions that we ask every day of how can I light up the world? Where's the most joy? who would love to hear from me today. These things are amazing, and they begin to show up in synchronicities around us. That's where the expect magic comes from. It's like I ask this question, I hear something, and I then begin to sense an answer. It's almost like a lighthouse lives inside of us. And a lighthouse does not go out and find a troubled ship to save, because if it did, all the other ships would sink. So the lighthouse stands in its purity, in its clarity, it stands there. And the ships need to look for the light, and they begin to notice the light. And when they notice the light, they think, oh, there it is. I'm safe now. I'm home. This is what our sovereignty is. Our sovereignty is our inner light, and it is our home. And so we just have to always ask questions that are going to make us feel better. That's the secret. We always want to feel better. Even if we just say, I want to feel better, there comes an idea or an inkling or just some little clue that we can move into. So by exploring this subject more deeply, which we'll do with each other, it's just so important that we stand strong and that we realize that we are the light, and we are the light for each other. We are the light for the world right now in every single way. If we can remember that, it motivates us. And so I just invite you to own your beauty, your light, your joy, your spark of energy that can affect this world in so many beautiful ways. And it's just standing in your own light, your own sovereignty.
So why don't you open us up to the next layer of sovereignty that you want to speak to us about?
Well, I think the idea of expecting magic is something that we can really build in ourselves. The acknowledgement of the magic that shows up in our life every day is what brings more of it into our awareness. You know, there was a book called The Celestine Prophecy that was really popular maybe 15 years ago or 20 years ago, where they talked about coincidences, that coincidences were going to become more evident. And I certainly, I know that you all notice that there are many, many synchronicities. There are no accidents sometimes in the way that we meet people, or that something shows up, or a phone call comes, or we sense that a phone call is coming, or there's just, it seems to me like there's such a myriad of magic that if we notice it, it expands. So some of you know that standing in a hotel lobby seems to be something that's brought a lot of magic into my life. It brought Elvis, and it brought my husband, Paul von Wellenetz, who walked off of an elevator. And I happened to be sitting between Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen at an Inside Edge meeting where they started brainstorming this book that they could do together called Chicken Soup for the Soul. And that led to me being the first co-author in that. So I had for years been practicing journaling, and journaling in so many ways, and inviting, asking questions, listening for answers, and keeping track of all of the different synchronicities that were showing up in my life. And I actually have acquired a huge amount of evidence of some of the magic. So I'm just going to show you some pictures. Rebecca is going to show us some pictures of magic that has shown up in my life just in the last year, just since my beautiful husband, Ted, passed a year and a half ago. This picture appeared on these lights appeared on the ceiling of my bedroom. And you'll notice there's a heart-shaped one there. There's no source for these lights. And Rebecca, just go ahead and move through these pictures. Here I am sitting in my meditation chair, and these lights appeared on my robe. And I just took a selfie. Here's my meditation chair. Notice that one light is coming from behind the chair, and that there's a heart-shaped light. And yeah, you can move on, sweetie. See the magic in every exquisite thing. Now, this is interesting. I have a family member who would rather not be mentioned, I think. But anyway, she went home after being with me after Ted passed and looked at her pillow. And Ted had huge hands. Everybody made comments about his hands. And she saw this on her pillow. And then if you'll show the next one, Rebecca, there is her own hand inside of this hand. And you can see that it's nowhere near large enough to have made that impression. And this happened 2-3 days ago. This is in my bedroom. These lights were just showing up around my bed. And here's lights in my living room, just out of nowhere. This is the most amazing proof to me. And when I talk with, here's lights on my reading chair coming from nowhere. I have another secret family member who doesn't want to be identified, and you can put us back on the same camera. But she is a medium, and she talks about light in so many different ways, about people having a near-death experience and moving into the light. And I just love how these things have shown up to me as proof that there is invisible support, that the whole thing, even though we need to own our sovereignty, which really means standing alone in our clarity, that there is this incredible amount of unseen help and divine help that is available to us. And all that we need to do is to invite it into our life. Just at the time that Ted was passing, he had been devoted to a guru. Her name was Sri Ma, and we had every holiday with her up in Napa, and she was so special. She called, and she happened to be in Palm Springs. This is the day before he passed. And she came over with her entourage and with Swamiji, and she decided she was doing a ceremony there. This is a miracle to have her right there in our presence at this particular time. And he looked up and he saw her, and his very last word was, Ma. And you could see how divinely delighted he was to see her there. And when I hear that word Ma, it's really the mystery, isn't it? It is the divine feminine at work in the world. And I could just feel his joy and his freedom as he was passing. And then to just go past the meditory, which was our place that we meditated, and look over and see my chair all lit up like that was just the most wonderful reminder that we're never alone. And that all of the answers that we want, all of the sovereignty that we want to own lives inside of us and is so much the divine expressing through us. And that all we need to do is ask in a beautiful way. So I'm just going to close with a couple of quotes from Mary Oliver, who is such a wonderful poet and always so present in the world. And she asked in one of her poems, "Are my boots old? Is my coat torn? Am I no longer young and still not half perfect? Let me keep my mind on my work, on what matters, which is mostly standing still and learning to be astonished." And then in another poem called When Death Comes, she says, "When it's over, I want to say I was a bride married to amazement. I was a bridegroom taking the world into my arms."
Beautiful.
So that's the whole purpose of my series on Expect Magic, is to open ourselves to our very highest presence in this world and become really familiar with the feeling of our purpose and our precious calling to be a beacon of light in this world. And therein lies our sovereignty. And I just want to thank you again for being like my inner circle, my sister tribe in drawing all this forth. Thank you.
Thank you. We hope that you enjoyed this particular segment of our Expect Magic series of 6. And if you did, we hope you will listen to all the rest.